Welcome to the Midnight Codex, where forgotten truths breathe and shadows tell their tale. Tonight, don't blink and don't look behind you.
I don't know what I was thinking when I said yes. Maybe I wasn't thinking at all. Maybe it was desperation talking. I was tired. Tired of the rejection letters piling up in my inbox. Tired of watching my savings slip away, the numbers dwindling as my hopes faded. Tired of staring at the same ceiling every night, waiting for something, anything, to change. I remember sitting there, hunched over on the edge of my bed, my only source of light the cold glow of my phone screen. The apartment was dark, silent, the kind of silence that doesn't comfort you but weighs down on you like the heavy hand of time itself. And that's when the email came. Subject: Night Watchman, Castle for hire. No introduction, no name, just a vague offer. A job in the middle of nowhere, a place no one had ever heard of, a castle of all things, a castle that needed someone to stay up all night and simply observe. It sounded absurd. But the pay was more than generous, enough to fix everything, at least for a while. I didn't hesitate, not really. I didn't question it. I didn't investigate. I just replied, "I'm interested." And that was it. 1 week later, I found myself driving through a fog that seemed endless. The headlights barely illuminated the road ahead. The gravel road stretched out before me like some endless trail, and the GPS had long since given up. I wasn't sure if I was headed toward something, or if I was just running from everything else. And then I saw it. The castle. It rose from the mist like a creature from a forgotten nightmare. Massive, ancient. It looked like it had been abandoned by time, left to rot in a place where no one would ever find it. The stone was dark, blackened by years of neglect. The windows were empty, staring out like dead eyes. The trees around it bent inward, as if trying to escape. I pulled up to the gate. Everything was quiet. Too quiet. No insects, no wind, just stillness. An unnatural stillness. And then the door opened. Not the gate, the main entrance. It creaked open slowly like it had been expecting me, as if it knew I was coming. Out stepped a man. Tall, thin, pale as a ghost with long white hair and eyes that never blinked. He looked like he had been carved from the same stone as the castle behind him. "Ethan," he said, his voice smooth, as if he'd known my name forever. "Welcome to the castle." I nodded. I didn't know if I should thank him or turn around and run. "I'm here about the night watch job." He smiled faintly, a smile that seemed both amused and warning at the same time. "I am Richard," he said. "Come, I'll show you where you'll be staying." Inside the castle, the air was colder than outside. The walls were sweating with age, and the smell of dust and something metallic hung in the air. The floorboards groaned with each step we took, and the oil lamps flickered as we passed, as if the light itself was reluctant to follow us. There were paintings lining the hallway, but none of the faces had eyes. I didn't ask. Richard walked like he knew the place better than the back of his hand, leading me deeper into the shadows. The further we went, the more I felt like I was descending, not into a basement, but into something darker, something otherworldly. Eventually, we reached a door, large, old, made of wood so dark it almost looked black. He unlocked it with a heavy key. The room inside was untouched, like it hadn't been disturbed in decades. A fireplace at the far end crackled weakly. The furniture, though ancient, was arranged as if someone had just stepped out. "This is where you'll stay during your shift," Richard said, motioning toward a chair near the fire. I stepped inside. The moment I crossed the threshold, I felt the air shift. It wasn't the same as before. It was thicker, like the room was watching me. "I'll leave you to get comfortable," Richard said. "But before I go, there are rules." He reached into his coat and pulled out a piece of paper, carefully folded. 6 rules. You must follow them. All of them. Always. I took the paper from him, unfolding it slowly. Rule 1. Never open the doors after midnight. Rule 2. Always keep the fire burning in the hearth. If it goes out, something will come. Rule 3. Do not go near the west wing, especially after 3 a.m. Rule 4. If you hear whispers calling your name, do not respond. Rule 5. Never look into the mirrors at night. Rule 6. Do not let the candles on the main staircase burn out. If they do, leave immediately. I looked up at him. Is this some kind of test? I asked, uncertain whether to laugh or feel unsettled. He didn't blink. It's not a test, Ethan. It's a warning. I let out a nervous laugh. It wasn't funny, but it was all I had left. A part of me thought it was some elaborate prank, a bizarre performance art piece. All right, I said, folding the paper and slipping it into my pocket. I'll follow the rules. Richard nodded once. Without another word, he turned and walked away. The heavy door closed behind him with a slow, deliberate thud, and I stood there, alone. The fire crackled weakly beside me. The shadows stretched long, as if they were waiting for something, waiting for me to do something. I read the rules again, one by one, and I didn't know it then, but I would break every single one of them. I thought I could handle it. I convinced myself that as long as I stuck to the rules, just 6 of them, kept my head down, stayed alert, and didn't let the place get to me, I'd be fine. It was just another weird job, another survival gig, something I could laugh about later. But the castle had other plans for me. When Richard left, he didn't say goodbye. He didn't give me a final warning or even a last look. He just turned and disappeared into the dark hallway, leaving me alone in a room that already felt like it was holding its breath. The only thing keeping me grounded was the fire. It wasn't much, but it was warm. The flames crackled softly in the hearth, offering a small comfort in a place that seemed to reject warmth altogether. I sat there, wrapped in my coat, trying to settle my nerves. The chair was old, creaking with every slight movement. My fingers tapped nervously against the armrest, a rhythmic gesture, like I was trying to drown out a sound that hadn't started yet. But the castle doesn't wait long. The clock in the far corner struck midnight. 12 slow, deliberate chimes echoed throughout the room. Each one felt louder than the last, ringing through the stone walls, sharp and unyielding. I felt them deep in my chest. It wasn't just a sound. It felt like a countdown, like something was waiting for the signal to start. I looked at the fire. It flickered strangely, uneven, as if it was struggling to hold itself together. The flames danced, but the shadows moved differently, stretching not away from the fire, but toward it. That's when I noticed it. The air, it shifted, becoming heavier, thicker, as though something had changed in the room. A sudden, invisible pressure, like someone had opened a window that wasn't there. My skin prickled. I told myself it was just the building. Old places do that. They creak, settle, breathe, right? But the unease I had felt when I first entered hadn't gone away. It had only deepened. And then came the knock. It was so soft, so faint I almost missed it. A light tapping sound, like fingernails against wood. I froze, waited. I convinced myself it was nothing. The castle was just settling, right? But then it came again. 3 knocks. Slow, clear. The sound cut through the silence like a blade. I sat there, my body refusing to move. I held my breath, straining to hear anything else, but the castle was dead silent. Even the fire seemed to pause. I couldn't hear anything except the echo of those knocks bouncing off the walls. I stood. I didn't want to. But something pulled at me, not physically, but in that way curiosity always does when it's wrapped in fear. The part of your brain that whispers, just check, just once. My hand reached for the doorknob. I turned it. The door opened with a long, breathy creak, and a blast of cold air rushed inside, as if it had been waiting for me. Outside, the courtyard was buried in thick, pale fog. The moon barely hung in the sky, dim and distant, as if it didn't want to shine on this place. I stepped outside. The air cut through me instantly. My boots crunched against gravel that felt too soft, too uncertain. It was as though the earth didn't want to hold me, like it was unsure of my place there. The silence was wrong, not peaceful, not still. It was hollow, an emptiness that devoured sound instead of holding it. And then I felt it. Eyes. Somewhere in that fog, something was watching me. I didn't see it, but I knew it was there. My instincts screamed at me to turn back. I stepped back toward the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The fog seemed to press closer. The courtyard stretched, distorted. The walls twisted, bending in ways that didn't make sense. I closed the door behind me, my pulse racing. And then the castle responded. The stone beneath my feet trembled, just slightly. A low, deep rumble, like something was shifting beneath the foundation. The walls creaked, not with age, but with intent. The fire flared, then dimmed again. The air grew colder. And that's when I realized what I'd done. I had broken Rule 1. Never open the doors after midnight. And now the castle had noticed. But there was no immediate punishment, no sudden horror or confrontation, just silence. And in that silence, something worse began to take shape. I went back to the fire, but it no longer felt warm. The chair creaked again, but now it sounded hollow, unnatural. The shadows in the room stretched longer, more twisted. They moved with purpose, creeping closer. When I stared into the flames, I saw something else, something behind them, something that didn't belong. I closed my eyes. I told myself it was nothing, just my mind playing tricks, the fatigue, the stress, the isolation. But the castle doesn't let you rest. It doesn't let you forget. That's when I heard it, a whisper, so faint it could have been the wind, if there had been any wind. Ethan, my name. Software drawn out, not urgent, just curious. I stood up slowly, turning toward the hallway. I saw nothing. Ethan. Come closer. I didn't move. I remembered the rule. If you hear whispers calling your name, do not respond. I told myself it was my imagination, a trick, the castle playing its games, that I was projecting, scared, alone. Then I felt it. A cold breath, steady, slow, on the back of my neck. I spun around, arms raised, heart in my throat. But I was alone. The fire flickered again. The shadows seemed to grow, to move with purpose now. They weren't random. One of them twitched, just slightly. And then came the footsteps, heavy, measured, like boots on wet stone. They came from the hallway. And then they stopped. I stared into the dark. Nothing emerged. The fire cracked again, breaking the silence. I stayed standing, frozen, for what felt like an hour, listening, waiting, not moving. Eventually, I sat back down, but I didn't feel safer. I felt watched, and I knew, deep in my gut, that the castle wasn't testing me anymore. It was watching to see what I would do next. By the time the clock struck 3, I could no longer tell if I was awake or if I had slipped into some twisted dream. The fire, once a steady presence, had become little more than a weak flicker, struggling to stay alive. The flames cast long, broken shadows across the room, shadows that didn't behave like shadows should. They leaned the wrong way, creeping, toward the corners, twisting in ways that defied reason. Every time I blinked, I felt like they were just a little closer. I sat frozen in the chair, my eyes locked on the hallway across the room. The silence felt suffocating now. I hadn't moved in what felt like hours. The castle's weight was on me, heavy and relentless. The longer I sat there, the more I felt like I was sinking into the very walls, like I was becoming part of the stone itself. But the castle, it has a way of pulling you in. It whispers to you. It speaks to that part of you that still wants to understand, even when you know you shouldn't. That's what curiosity is in a place like this. It's not a choice, it's a symptom. I knew I shouldn't. The rules were clear. Rule 3. Do not go near the West Wing, especially after 3 a.m. But the West Wing had been calling to me ever since I arrived. I'd felt its pull, a low hum in the back of my mind. And now, it was louder. I could feel my body betraying me. Every muscle screamed at me to stay still, but my feet moved before I even realized it. I stood up. Each step was heavy. The air felt thicker, like I was walking through syrup. The hallway twisted around me, the walls leaning in, as though the castle itself was trying to guide me, push me deeper into its maze. The door to the west wing loomed ahead, tall and arched like some ancient doorway waiting to swallow me whole. I reached for the handle. Locked. Of course it was locked. I should have turned back. I should have respected the warning. But I didn't. I turned away from the door, my heart pounding in my chest. The castle had trapped me, or maybe I had trapped myself. I glanced around, trying to find something to calm my nerves, and then I saw it. A small, ancient table, covered in dust, its surface cracked and worn, and underneath it, a key, tarnished, cold, and waiting. I picked it up almost mechanically. It felt heavy in my hand, like it had been waiting for me all along. The key slid easily into the lock, almost too easily, like it had been made for this very moment. The door opened with a low groan, a sound that seemed to come from deep within the walls of the castle. It was as if the entire building exhaled, releasing a breath it had been holding for centuries. I stepped inside. The hallway beyond was darker than anything I had seen so far, not just unlit, unwelcoming. The faint lanterns mounted on the walls flickered weakly, casting small halos of dying yellow light against the stone. The air felt colder, thicker. It smelled damp, like mildew and forgotten memories. The walls closed in, bending in strange, unnatural angles. I stepped forward, each footfall echoing louder than the last. The place felt wrong. It wasn't just a hallway, it was a tunnel, a path leading deeper into the unknown. My mind screamed at me to turn back, but my body ignored it, moving forward deeper into the cold, deeper into the shadows. And then I saw her, at the far end of the hallway. A woman. She was hunched, her back turned to me, her hair hanging in tangled clumps around her face like a veil. She was dressed in what looked like a shredded gown, torn and tattered. Her body was still, but her sobs, the soft, broken sobs echoed through the corridor like they were bouncing off the inside of my skull. I froze. My instincts screamed at me to run, to leave this place, but my feet betrayed me. I moved closer, drawn by something I couldn't explain. The hallway seemed to stretch as I walked, warping, like the walls were growing longer to keep me moving forward. Every step felt like it took me deeper into some terrible truth I wasn't ready to face. I stopped just a few feet away from her. Her crying grew louder, more desperate, but she didn't turn. She didn't move. She was just there, sobbing as though the world had ended. I didn't know why I was still standing there. I should have turned around. I should have gone back to the room, but I couldn't. I couldn't leave her there. Her head lifted slowly, almost painfully. It took her so long to look at me that I almost wondered if it was deliberate. When she finally did, I saw her face, or rather, the absence of one. There were no features, no eyes, no nose, no mouth, just two black voids where her eyes should have been, endless, empty, consuming. Her skin was thin and stretched, like paper soaked in ash, crumbling with every movement. Her lips parted as though she were about to speak, but no sound came. Only the soft, broken sobs continued, a terrible noise that felt like it was seeping into my very bones. And then, she whispered, "Leave." It was barely audible, barely a sound at all, but it hit me like a scream, the words resonating in my chest, in my skull. "You shouldn't be here. Leave now." I wanted to run. I wanted to turn and flee back to my room, back to the safety of the fire, but I couldn't move. My legs felt like stone. My feet were rooted to the floor. And then she vanished. No flash of light, no scream, just gone. As if she had never been there at all. The hallway fell silent, silent in a way that made my ears ring. The cold that had been creeping in grew worse, a bone-deep chill that seeped into my very core. I staggered backward, still feeling the weight of her presence even though she was no longer there. But the cold, it didn't stop. It didn't fade. It stayed with me, pressing in from all sides. And then, I heard it. Footsteps. Not behind me, not in front of me. They were everywhere. I turned, searching the hallway, but saw nothing. The shadows twisted, and I thought I saw figures moving, just out of sight, too fast for me to catch. I was being followed. I wasn't alone. I turned back to the door, my heart racing. I needed to leave. I needed to get out. But when I reached for the handle, I realized something had changed. The hallway had shifted. The door I had entered through was gone. I couldn't find it. Only a wall of stone, solid and unyielding where it had been. I was trapped. The castle had marked me, and it wasn't going to let me leave. I don't know how long I sat there, staring at the embers. The hours had melted into one another, and though time passed, it felt like I was sinking deeper into the marrow of the castle. My thoughts ran in endless circles, my mind turning on itself like a wheel stuck in mud. I tried to hold on to something, logic, reason, but everything was slipping, everything was fading. The fire was the only anchor I had. But even that, I realized, was betraying me. The warmth that had once embraced the room now barely kissed the air. The glow was thin, strained, flickering like a dying heartbeat. I stood slowly, my legs stiff, my breath visible as I moved toward the hearth. The cold was no longer subtle, it was biting. It seeped into my bones, into the spaces behind my eyes, into my thoughts. The flames were shrinking, struggling for life. No matter how many logs I added, it seemed the fire didn't want to burn. Or maybe something didn't want it to. Panic bloomed in my chest, hot and heavy, and I threw more wood into the hearth, hoping to coax the flames back. The sound of cracking bark, the thud of dry timber, it all felt desperate. I knelt there, hands trembling, as the fire flickered, stuttered, and refused to rise. The light receded from the walls, and with it came the shadows. They crawled forward like ink spilled in reverse, thick and deliberate. They stretched across the floor in unnatural angles, moving without source or reason. There was no wind, no movement, but the darkness, it grew like a living thing. I backed away from the hearth, my heart hammering. The room, which just an hour before had been dim but manageable, was now a tomb. The air was heavier, thicker, like I was breathing through fabric soaked in water. And then I saw it. A mirror, large, framed in dark, intricate wood that twisted like thorned vines. It hadn't been there before, I was sure of it. But now it stood tall in the far corner of the room, like a sentinel. Something about it pulled me. I stepped closer, despite every part of me screaming to turn away. The glass was cracked in places, fogged with age, but something stirred in it, something that felt too aware. I reached out and touched it. The surface was cold, far colder than it should have been. I watched as my reflection emerged slowly through the haze of dust. My face looked tired, yes, but there was something else. Something wrong. My eyes glowed, just faintly but unmistakably. They shimmered with an unnatural light, a color I couldn't name. Too bright to be human, too soft to be real. And then, the reflection changed. My face twisted, the skin pulled, the features distorted, the mouth curled upward in a smile that was not mine. Wide, predatory, mocking. I blinked, trying to clear it, but it didn't go away. The smile widened, stretching past the limits of anatomy, revealing too many teeth, sharp and clean like bone. My reflection was watching me now. It wasn't copying, it was performing. It moved slower than I did, and its gaze didn't follow mine. It watched me, the real me, with a hunger that felt personal. I staggered back, bile rising in my throat, but the image stayed in my mind. I could feel that smile burned into my skull. Even with my back turned, I still saw it. Even with my eyes closed, I still saw it. It wasn't just a trick of the glass. It was something else, something inside the castle, something that had borrowed my face. I turned from the mirror and tried to focus on the fire, but the hearth was dead. Only embers now. The last of the light gave out with a sigh, and the cold rushed in like a flood. I shivered, arms wrapped around myself as if that could stop the shuddering. And then, the whispers returned. At first they were just breaths, not words, not sounds, just presence, like breath against the back of your neck when no one's there. But soon, they spoke. They called my name again. Ethan, low, drawn out, from every direction. I spun around, but the room remained still, at least on the surface. The walls didn't move, but the air did. The sound came from the corners, from under the floor, from behind the stones. The voices were layered, male, female, old, childlike, all whispering the same thing. "Come closer." I pressed my hands over my ears, but it didn't matter. They weren't coming from outside anymore. They were inside my mind, inside the walls of my thoughts. The room grew colder. The shadows, sharper. They weren't just stretching now. They were rising, taking form. Figures began to emerge from the dark edges of the room. At first, they looked like men, tall, hunched, but as they moved, I saw they weren't human. Their limbs were too long. Their joints bent the wrong way. Their eyes glowed faintly in the dark, not like pupils, but like tiny lanterns submerged in tar. They watched me. They didn't speak. They didn't move. They just waited. I stumbled back, trying to reach the door, but the floor seemed thicker somehow, like I was wading through wet sand. Every step was slow, exhausting. I could feel my pulse in my throat, hammering, screaming for me to move faster. And then, the fire died. Completely. The final flicker vanished, and the room collapsed into black. Total. Suffocating. Darkness. And yet, I saw everything. Not with my eyes, but with something else. The castle showed it to me. The twisted figures, the mouths in the walls, the eyes under the floorboards, the sound of dragging chains that didn't make noise. I felt them waiting, but what chilled me wasn't their presence. It was that I couldn't see myself anymore. I looked down, and in the black, there was no body, no hands, no shape. Only the memory of me, and the sound of my own breath echoing back like it belonged to someone else. The whispers stopped. The castle stopped. Everything stopped. Except one thing. The reflection. It didn't need a mirror anymore. It was inside me now. It smiled, inside my thoughts, and said without speaking, "You've finally let me in." And I knew in that moment the castle didn't just want to scare me. It didn't want to haunt me. It wanted to wear me. My thoughts were no longer my own, not really. They unraveled slowly, quietly, like thread pulled from the hem of a coat, one strand at a time, until you look down and realize you're bare. That's what the castle did to me. Not with violence, not with screams, but with time, with silence. With the weight of its breathless halls pressing in from every direction, the whispers, once occasional and ignorable, had become my atmosphere. I no longer noticed when they started. I only noticed when they stopped. Because silence now meant it was listening. They came from everywhere, from the cracks in the walls, from the seams in the floor, from behind my own eyes. At first, I thought they were tricks, stress, lack of sleep, my mind compensating for fear. But now they were part of me, not an echo, not a presence, a parasite. Ethan. The voice wasn't just a voice, it was a tone, a memory I couldn't place, like a dream I'd had 1,000 times but never remembered until now. It sounded like someone I once knew, or maybe someone I used to be. I spun around at the sound, heart hammering, lungs burning, but there was no one there. Of course there wasn't. There never was. Only the shadows that moved slower than the light could reach, only the broken corners of this place where sight failed. The fire struggled behind me, its glow now a fragile thread holding the dark at bay. But I didn't trust it anymore. Even the light felt compromised. I turned my head and once again I saw him, that version of me, my reflection, watching me from across the room, grinning. Every mirror had become a window. Every piece of glass reflected not me, but something wearing my face. And it smiled, always smiled, like it knew something I didn't, like it had already won. I stopped looking into them, but even that didn't help. I didn't need a mirror anymore to see him. He was always there now, behind my eyes. My fingers shook as I gripped the edge of the cold, crumbling mantle. I stared down at the fire and begged it to respond, to flare up, to push back against the cold, but it barely flickered. I was breathing mist. My lips were dry, my chest tight, This wasn't normal cold. It wasn't natural. It was a cold that felt targeted, like it wanted to break me down from the inside. "Who's there?" I shouted into the room, the words more desperation than question. My voice cracked. It sounded too small in the space, like it didn't belong to me. No one answered. The silence that followed was worse. It didn't just return, it snapped back into place like a closing trap. Thick, total. It pressed in around me as if the air itself had a will. And then it dropped again. The temperature fell like a stone through water, and I felt something shift. The shadows on the walls sharpened, stretched, no longer flat, no longer waiting. They were transforming, solidifying, and that's when I heard it. "Leave." Not a whisper this time, a command, a voice full of ancient weight, with a power that resonated through the very stones, and with it came a pulse, no, not a sound, but a feeling that rolled through the room like a shockwave. Something had stirred. I stumbled backward, my balance giving way. The realization came slowly, as all truths in this place seemed to. This castle, it wasn't just haunted, it was alive. And worse than that, worse than anything I could have imagined, was the thought that maybe it had always been, that every stone, every hallway, every creaking floorboard was part of something far older than me, far older than rules. And I had disturbed it. The fire gave one last twitch and died, and then the walls began to bleed. At first I thought it was my vision, warped by fear and cold, but no. I saw the stone crack. I saw the thick black liquid seep out. It wasn't water. It wasn't oil. It was heavier, slower, foul-smelling, like rot left in the earth too long. It dripped down the walls like veins split open, and when it touched the floor, it didn't splash. It crawled. The whispers roared now, no longer faint, no longer scattered. 100 voices, all speaking, all calling my name, over and over and over. Ethan, Ethan, Ethan. I dropped to my knees. I couldn't stand. I couldn't think. I clutched my head, fingernails digging into my scalp, trying to drown out the sound. But it was inside. It had gotten in. Every thought I had was layered with its voice. The shadows rushed in, fast now, no longer slow, no longer creeping. They surrounded me, swarming the room like a living tide. Their shapes twisted into things I couldn't process, limbs where they didn't belong, eyes where there should have been none. "You've awakened it," the whispers said. "No," declared. That phrase came not as a warning, but as a sentence. The castle pulsed. The walls beat like a heart, slow, monstrous, deep. I could feel the rhythm vibrating through the floor into my bones. Something old was moving, shifting. It had heard me. It had seen me. And now it had risen. My body trembled. Every muscle fought itself. I tried to move, but there was nowhere to go. I was surrounded, trapped. The fire was dead. The light was gone. The warmth was a memory. And the dark was awake. The whispers screamed now, not words, not sounds, just force. Like they were trying to tear sound itself apart. I couldn't tell what was real anymore. My own breath mixed with theirs. My voice joined their chorus without permission. I could hear myself calling my own name, mocking, weeping. The figures in the dark were solid now. They moved with purpose, with intent. They didn't need to speak. Their eyes said enough. And the worst part? I felt them smiling. All of them. The same smile. His smile. My smile. The one I'd seen in the mirror. The one that no longer needed glass to find me. The castle had cracked something inside me. It had pulled me open like a drawer, rifled through my memories and found the one piece I couldn't defend, my fear. And it had fed, grown, evolved. The room spun. I couldn't see, couldn't hear. I wasn't collapsing. I was dissolving. And then, stillness, complete, suffocating, terrifying. The voices faded, leaving only one sound behind, breathing, not mine. It came from right in front of me, slow, wet, close. I opened my eyes and saw nothing, but I felt it, felt the breath on my cheek, the presence pressing against my chest like a hand, and I knew. I was no longer a visitor here. I was a part of it. The castle had claimed me, and it would never let me go. I wasn't walking anymore. I was drifting, through air that had lost its oxygen, through halls that no longer felt like places but memories. The world outside the castle no longer felt real, and even my own body felt like it was slipping out of sync, like I was watching it move from somewhere else. The deeper I went, the more I understood. The castle hadn't just trapped me here physically. It had swallowed me entirely, mind, memory, soul. The shadows weren't following me anymore. They were surrounding me, accompanying me like silent companions, stretching with every step I took, no matter where I turned. The air felt like wet cloth pressed against my face, thick with something not quite living, but very aware, and watching. Always watching. Then I saw the candles. The main staircase stood before me like a throat ready to swallow. The candles lining its edges flickered with thin, trembling flames. Once I had found comfort in their glow, warm, welcoming, almost gentle. But now their light was frail, like they were barely holding back something waiting just beyond the veil. And I remembered. Rule 6, the final one. Do not let the candles burn out on the main staircase. If they do, leave immediately. I stared at the flames, my heart heavy. They were dying. One by one, their light blinked out, soft, quiet, but final. With each candle extinguished, I felt the temperature drop, the energy shift, something in the castle turning its head toward me. I had broken the last rule, and the castle had been waiting for it. The sound started in the distance, footsteps, not hurried, not stumbling, slow, heavy, purposeful. They echoed like drum beats, deep, precise, closer with every second. My body tensed, my breathing quickened, but I didn't move. I couldn't. It was already too late. The castle had me. The walls no longer felt solid. They felt like ribs. The ceiling like a skull. I wasn't inside a building anymore. I was inside something else. The footsteps kept coming, and then stopped. I spun toward the sound, panic choking my lungs, but there was nothing. Only the dark. Only the impossible silence pressing in on all sides. The hallway looked the same, but it wasn't. It felt more like a memory than a place, familiar, but wrong. And then the pressure changed. A presence. I could feel it behind me. The sensation of being watched shifted into something else, being approached. The shadows moved with intention. I turned to run, but the door I had come through was gone. Only blank stone now. I reached out blindly, slamming my hand against the cold surface. No handle, no gap, just a seamless wall. The castle had sealed me in. My chest tightened. My breaths became gasps. I tried again, slamming my shoulder into the wall, clawing for an exit that no longer existed. And then it came. From the far end of the corridor, a shape emerged, a figure, tall, dressed in black, face cloaked in shadow, as if the darkness had chosen to protect it. It didn't speak at first. It didn't need to. Its presence said enough, but when it finally did, the voice was low, measured, familiar. "You've replaced me, Ethan." I stopped breathing. The voice echoed in my chest. I didn't know if it was real or if I was imagining it, if my own mind had cracked and this was what was left. But the figure kept speaking. "Now, you're part of it." The words dropped like weights inside me. I backed away, my legs barely holding me. My vision blurred, my head spinning. I wasn't just in danger. I wasn't just being hunted. I was becoming something else. The castle hadn't been trying to kill me. It had been trying to change me, piece by piece, memory by memory. I looked down at my hands, and for a moment, I didn't recognize them. And then the walls began to bleed again. Dark fluid seeped from the cracks, thicker now, pulsing, warm. It trickled in lines that looked too intentional, like veins. Like the castle wasn't crumbling. It was awakening. The air grew colder than it ever had before, and the whispers returned, not from the corners, but from within. Not many voices, not scattered. One voice, all-encompassing. "You've awakened it." It was everywhere, in the stone, in my spine, in my teeth. The castle wasn't speaking with a mouth. It was the mouth. I fell to my knees. I couldn't hold myself up anymore, and I realized The castle had never been just a place. It was a vessel, a prison, a body, a soul, and I was inside it. And now, it was inside me. The footsteps resumed, louder than before, now pounding like thunder. Shadows solidified, no longer just tricks of light. They were limbs, faces, eyes, dozens of them, all surrounding me, watching, judging, smiling. "You've broken the rules," the voice whispered again. No anger, no hate, just finality. The figures reached out. Their hands were cold, bony, their touch like frostbite. They didn't grab me. They didn't drag me. They welcomed me, like I was one of them, because I was. My mind no longer resisted. My thoughts weren't my own anymore. The last pieces of Ethan, whoever he used to be, were dissolving like ash in the wind, and the castle accepted what was left. The fire was gone. The candles were dead. The last rule had been broken, and in the dark, I saw the truth. I was never meant to escape. I'd never been meant to leave. "You are one of us now," the voice came from behind me. It didn't belong to the figure in black. It belonged to the caretaker. His voice was calm, gentle, as if welcoming me home. "You were never meant to leave." I tried to scream, but I couldn't find my voice. I tried to run, but my legs no longer listened. I turned toward the doorway, except it wasn't empty anymore. Someone was there, a new figure, still fresh, still shaking, still full of questions and nerves, a replacement, a new night watchman. And as I faded into the darkness, I understood everything. The castle wasn't a haunted place. It was a living ritual, a cycle, and I was now part of it, forever.